So the position I would like to debate this evening is one, first of all, that I don't believe in. So I want to just make that very clear from the beginning, because the couple times I've practiced debate in a more kind of official effort, in university we were trying to start up a debate club, so we just practiced a little bit, and this would have been like 10 or 11 years ago. One of the things I found most fascinating and most useful and most helpful to me personally was debating a position I did not hold. So, in honor of the reason that Mr. Moreno lost his debate, I thought I would start with the proposition that I will try to defend, that Ben Shapiro is a racist. I'm very sorry, Ben. It's just for the sake of education, let's say. Nothing personal, and again, I don't believe it. But I'll try to make my best argument for it. So first, let's start with definitions. A racist is a person who believes that one race is either inferior to others or that their race is superior to others. And I think this is very important because this idea of superiority and inferiority is really the key of what makes somebody racist and what qualifies them to be called racist. So the sources I'll be using are Ben Shapiro's own, let's say, apology article on the Daily Wire. It's the article where he lists everything that he said that he regrets and that he apologizes for. And so none of those things that he's apologized for will be used against him. And then the other article that I reference is the Cool Kids Philosopher on current affairs. Both links will be in the description. But I'm just going to start with one key point, which is the most quoted racist sounding tweet that Ben Shapiro gave, which is that Arabs love to bomb and live in sewers. Jews love to build. Hashtag settlements rock. Something along those lines. Now, Ben himself has clarified this statement, claiming that he was specifically referring to Palestinian leadership when he meant Arabs. He said it was in the context of what he was talking about and in the context of what was happening. So let's grant him that. Let's assume that that's what he meant, that he meant the Palestinian leadership. He has also claimed that the Palestinian Arabs have been radicalized. And so they have a radical view of Jews and of the Israeli state, which is the reason why they vote for what he refers to as terrorist leadership in terrorist organizations. So the question that I think is important to ask then is, then in that case, does Ben feel that Palestinian Arabs are inferior to Israeli Jews? And I think it would actually be hard to argue that he doesn't believe that they're inferior, because being radicalized is an inferior position to be in. To believe in violence would be inferior to living and believing in a democracy. And this comes into the second point that Ben Shapiro often uses to defend his views of other groups, where he claims that it's not an economic problem, it's not a racism problem, it's a cultural problem. But I think that culture, essentially what does that mean? You're saying that that culture is inferior. He's very clearly saying that the black community in America has a cultural problem, and therefore what he is saying is that the black culture in America is inferior. So I think from Ben's own words, it is not unreasonable or unrealistic to say that Ben feels that his culture, his worldview is superior to one, the Palestinian culture and worldview, which he attributes to the race of the people living in Palestine, and the African American, the black community in America, their culture, which he again ties to their race as being an inferior culture. So for these reasons, I think though Ben quickly rejects the term racist for the connotations it has, from a dictionary definition and also the consequences, and this would take more deep diving to explain, but just purely from the definition of racism of superior and inferior, I think it is clear that Ben feels that Palestinian Arabs are inferior to Israeli Jews, and that the black community's culture, tied again to their race by his own admission, is inferior to the other cultures that make up America, including Asian Americans, which he often quotes. He mentions Norwegian Americans, he mentions religious Americans, Middle America. And so for those reasons, based purely on his arguments of cultural superiority and inferiority, it is logical to refer to such a view as being racist.